Hello, ladies and gentlemen. They say power reveals the true character of a man. But what happens when two of the most powerful men in the world collide publicly, not in a courtroom, not in a secret boardroom, but in front of the whole world, where tweets become weapons and headlines become history? This is not just a news story. This is Musk versus Trump. And tonight, we're not here to pick sides. We're here to understand the storm behind the silence and the truth behind the tension. They both command attention, not because they ask for it, but because the world can't seem to look away. One, a man who took business into the future. Building electric cars, launching rockets, challenging the status quo. The other, a man who sat in the highest seat of power, rewriting political rules, speaking with fire, dividing and uniting people all at once. Elon Musk, Donald Trump. Two men, two empires. But now, one message has drawn a line between them. When Elon Musk made a public call for Donald Trump's impeachment, the internet didn't just react, it erupted. And in that moment, something changed. Not just between the two of them, but in how the world sees power, leadership, and the fine line between influence and responsibility. Because this is not just a disagreement, this is a clash, a power struggle between two giants, both with massive followings, bold voices, and unshakable convictions. And yet, as loud as their voices are, it's the silence in between their words that speaks louder. Why now? Why would Elon Musk, someone who has fiercely defended free speech, even when it cost him billions, now publicly speak against a man like Trump? Some say it's politics, some say it's personal, but sometimes it's deeper than what's posted online. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about conscience. Because when two powerful men disagree publicly, they're not just debating policy. They're shifting culture. They're shaping minds. They're telling the world what power looks like when it's used or misused. There was a time Musk and Trump appeared to share a common thread: anti-establishment, unapologetic, unfiltered. They weren't afraid to break the mold. They weren't afraid to offend. And that's why millions followed them, because they dared to say what others wouldn't. But boldness without boundaries can be dangerous, and influence without humility can become destructive. Maybe Elon saw something. Maybe he felt something. Maybe this wasn't about politics at all. Maybe it was about drawing a line, not to divide, but to protect. Because there comes a moment when silence is no longer neutral, when not speaking becomes just as loud as saying the wrong thing. And perhaps for Elon Musk, this was that moment. He didn't make a speech. He didn't release a documentary, just a few words. But they echoed. They shook the very ground of political and tech spaces alike. And Trump? He's never been one to stay silent. He fought back as expected, with conviction, with intensity, with fire. The world watched as two titans stood across from one another, not on a battlefield, but in the battlefield of ideas, not with weapons, but with words. What makes this clash different is not that it happened, but why it happened. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens when power becomes too confident in its own echo? What happens when the ones we once looked up to dust dirt up? It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens when the ones we once looked up to start tearing each other down? This isn't just about right or wrong. This is about what's at stake. Our values, our beliefs, our future. Because when people with this much power fight publicly, it affects more than just their reputations. It affects decisions. It influences elections. It shifts the direction of history. And yet, in the middle of the noise, we forget something. These men, no matter how powerful, are still human, flawed, opinionated, imperfect. And maybe this power clash isn't meant to make us choose a side. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it's meant to make us reflect on who we've given our loyalty to and why. The truth is, Power is only beautiful when it's used with purpose. Real leadership doesn't just build companies or win elections. It builds people. It inspires growth. It protects truth. So maybe this isn't about Musk versus Trump. Maybe it's about us, about the kind of leaders we want to follow, and the kind of people we want to become. Because in a world full of power struggles, the strongest thing we can hold on to is wisdom. The wisdom to pause, to think, to ask what really matters. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to look at giants clashing and decide not to be swayed by their size, but to be anchored by our own principles. Sometimes, when the world is too loud, we forget to step back and just breathe. We get caught in the headlines, the breaking news, the viral tweets. We hear the clash, we feel the heat, and before we know it, we've already taken sides. But what if the real story isn't in the noise? What if the truth is hiding quietly in the bigger picture? Because this isn't just about Elon Musk calling for President Trump's impeachment. This is not just a billionaire with a platform versus a former president with a legacy. This goes beyond politics, beyond influence. This is about what kind of world we're creating when power no longer comes with responsibility. It's easy to look at this like just another fight between two strong personalities. To say, they'll be fine. They have money. They have people. They have power. But what about the people watching? What about the next generation learning what leadership looks like from tweets and tantrums? What about the ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire of giants who forgot the weight of their words? There's something deeply unsettling about living in a world where one post can cause a market to crash, where one opinion can divide an entire nation, where truth is no longer what's right, but what gets the most attention. We live in a time where perception has become more powerful than principle. And that's dangerous. Because when we stop questioning the intentions behind the influence, we lose sight of what really matters. It's not about whether Musk is right or Trump is wrong. It's not even about who wins this battle in the end. It's about us, what we've become, what we're becoming, and what we're allowing to shape our values, our conversations, our truth. Because if we only listen to the loudest voice, we might miss the wisest one. And if we keep rewarding controversy, we will forget the value of quiet integrity. Maybe this is a wake-up call, not to cancel each other, but to pause, to reflect, to ask the hard questions we've been avoiding. Why do we elevate people so quickly only to destroy them just as fast? Why do we chase personalities more than we pursue purpose? Why do we allow fame to overshadow character? The bigger picture isn't about Elon or Trump. It's about a world that's slowly forgetting how to listen, how to think critically, how to separate emotion from truth. It's about the danger of building platforms without foundation, the danger of power without accountability, the danger of forgetting that freedom isn't just about what we can say, it's about what we should say. And maybe, just maybe, the real battle isn't between Musk and Trump. Maybe it's between who we are and who we were meant to be. Because the real tragedy is not in disagreement. The real tragedy is when we lose compassion, when we celebrate failure, when we mock someone's downfall instead of learning from their choices. There is nothing wrong with calling out injustice. There is nothing wrong with standing your ground. But there is something wrong when we forget to look at the human behind the headline. We forget that even the most powerful are still people. Broken, flawed, afraid. Just like us, the bigger picture is a reminder that we all play a role in shaping this world with what we post, with what we share, with who we defend, and with how we respond when two giants clash in front of us. Do we cheer for destruction or do we hope for redemption? Do we throw stones or do we build bridges? Because at the end of the day, the bigger picture is not about who was louder. It's about who left the world better. It's about having the courage to not just look at the fight, but to ask why it started in the first place. Because real change doesn't come from conflict. It comes from conviction. And real strength is not proven by how many people you can silence, but by how many you can still reach with truth, with grace, and with a heart that remembers. We're all in this together. No matter how big the names or how different the views, we all wake up under the same sky, and we all have a choice to be part of the noise or to be part of the healing. This moment we're witnessing, it's not just about disagreement. It's not just about politics. It's not just about two public figures exchanging words in the public square. It's something deeper, something heavier, something that touches the very foundation of what a nation believes in and how it chooses to move forward. Because when two of the most powerful voices in the world stand on opposite ends of a fight, it sends a ripple effect that reaches beyond tweets and interviews. It shapes conversations around dinner tables. It shores unrest in classrooms. It even changes how a young mind sees leadership for the first time. And whether we like it or not, the tension between Elon Musk and Donald Trump isn't just between them anymore. Now it belongs to everyone. It belongs to a country that's already tired, divided, searching for clarity in the chaos. What does it mean when one of the world's most influential innovators openly calls for the impeachment of a former president? What message does it send to a nation that's still trying to recover from years of political noise, emotional fatigue, and ideological warfare? It means people are watching more closely now, not to be informed, but to be armed, not to learn, but to take sides. That's the danger, because when issues like this surface, they rarely bring people together anymore. They polarize. They split communities. They force people to choose between loyalty and logic. But maybe that's what makes this moment so crucial. Maybe this is the time to step back and stop asking who's louder and start asking what's being lost. Because somewhere between Musk's message and Trump's response, we've lost something sacred. The space for honest conversation. The space where two people can disagree without being enemies. The space where truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. This is bigger than politics. This is about how America sees itself. A country that once stood as a symbol of unity in diversity is now being reshaped by division that runs deeper than party lines. It's not just red vs blue anymore. It's truth vs popularity, integrity vs influence, purpose vs ego. And when those lines blur, it becomes harder to trust, harder to believe, harder to hope. There was a time when leaders were expected to serve with humility. Now, the louder someone is, the more attention they get. Now, being bold is confused with being reckless, and being honest is often mistaken for being harsh. But a nation can't grow when its people are constantly forced to pick a side. A nation can't heal when every disagreement becomes a battleground. This moment, this clash, reveals something painful, but necessary. It shows us how fragile trust has become, how easily it's broken, and how deeply people are yearning for something real, something grounded. It's not about agreeing with Musk. It's not about defending Trump. It's about asking, what are we becoming when we allow division to define us? Because America's greatest strength was never in its noise. It was in its ability to rise above the noise, to choose unity over pride, to choose truth even when it's uncomfortable, to choose leaders who don't just echo what we want to hear, but challenge us to become better. That's what this means for America. It means we're at a crossroads. One path leads to more division, more debates, more headlines that burn hot but fade quickly. The other path, it's quieter, it's slower, but it's healing. It's the path of listening, of learning, of realizing that behind every powerful figure is a nation that deserves better than sound bites and scandals. Because if this country is going to move forward, it won't be because of one man's post or another's comeback. It'll be because people chose to rise above it all, to see the bigger story, to ask better questions, to build bridges when the world is handing them bricks to throw. That's what this moment demands. Not more noise, but more wisdom. Not more pride, but more purpose. And maybe, just maybe, this is where the healing begins. Not with them, with us. With the ordinary people who still believe in the extraordinary possibility of what America can become. When it remembers who it truly is. He was never the kind to stay quiet. From the very beginning, Donald Trump built his identity on being outspoken, unfiltered, direct, unapologetically bold. When the world whispered, he shouted. When critics came, he faced them head-on. To his supporters, it was strength. To his opponents, it was provocation. But to everyone watching, it was undeniable. This man was never afraid to speak. So when Elon Musk made his stand calling for Trump's impeachment, there was no doubt in anyone's mind he would respond. And he did. True to form, his words came not in silence, not in subtlety, but in full force. Swift, cutting, confident. He didn't hesitate. He never does. Because for Donald Trump, every attack feels personal. Every criticism is a challenge, and every name, even someone as globally respected as Elon Musk, becomes just another opponent in the ring. But maybe there's more to it than just pride. Maybe behind the strong voice, the firm stance, and the sharp comebacks is a man who believes he's fighting for more than just himself. Because for Trump, this was never just about politics. It was about legacy, identity, control. To him, every accusation feels like an attempt to erase everything he built. His presidency, his power, his... So when someone like Elon Musk, a fellow titan, a cultural icon in his own right, openly questioned him, it wasn't just disagreement, it was betrayal. And in moments like that, Trump doesn't just respond, he retaliates. He doesn't let things simmer. He brings them to a boil. But there's a truth here that's easy to miss in the firestorm of reactions. Behind every public comeback is a deeper conversation that never gets said. Maybe Trump is afraid of losing relevance. Maybe he's frustrated by a system he feels turned on him. Maybe he genuinely believes that standing up for himself is the same as standing up for the country. And maybe that's why his responses always sound like war cries instead of conversations. Because when a man feels the world is against him, every disagreement feels like a declaration of war. So he fights, not just with words, but with his entire presence. Every interview, every post, every rally, all crafted to remind people of who he is and why he should not be underestimated. Some call it ego, others call it survival, but maybe it's both. Because power changes a man. And when you've held the most powerful seat in the world, it's hard to let go of the microphone, hard to accept criticism, hard to stay silent when the cameras still want your voice. But in all the noise, something gets lost, not just between Musk and Trump, but within Trump himself. Somewhere along the journey, the mission blurred into the man. And instead of asking what's best for the country, the question started sounding more like, what are they saying about me? But here's the uncomfortable truth. Leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about knowing when to listen. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is pause, to breathe, to reflect, to resist the urge to hit back just to prove a point. Because every time a leader speaks, it teaches something. And right now, what's being taught is that disagreement equals disrespect. That opposing views deserve disrespect. That opposing views deserve disrespect. That the louder you are, the more people will follow. But volume doesn't equal value. And reaction doesn't always reflect righteousness. Maybe Trump's response wasn't just for Musk. Maybe it was a message to everyone watching. I'm still here. I still matter. I will not be silenced. And maybe that's what makes this so complicated. Because no matter how controversial, no matter how divisive, he still represents millions. People who feel unheard. People who feel forgotten. People who look at him and see someone who fought for them when no one else did. That's what makes his reaction so powerful. It's not just his voice. It's the voices of those who believe in him, who echo him, who carry his message as their own. But with that power comes responsibility. Because when you speak for so many, your words can either build bridges or burn them. And in moments like this, when the world is watching two giants collide, what matters most is not who wins the argument. There are moments when silence becomes too heavy to carry, when the weight of what's left unsaid starts to feel louder than any spoken truth. And in moments like that, someone stands up, not for applause, not for approval, but because conscience won't let them sit down any longer. That's what happened when Elon Musk made his statement. It wasn't just bold, it was disruptive. It was sharp, intentional, and loud enough to echo far beyond social media. Some say it was unexpected, others say it was inevitable, but no one can deny it was powerful. Calling for the impeachment of a former US president is not just a passing opinion. It's not a casual remark thrown into the void. It's a stand. It's a statement that carries consequences. And Elon knew that. He didn't say it out of impulse. This wasn't just another tweet to stir the pot or a headline grab. There was something deeper in his tone. Something that suggested conviction had finally outweighed convenience. Because for a man like Elon Musk, every word has weight. When he speaks, markets move. When he posts, billions listen. And yet, this wasn't about stocks. It wasn't about business. It wasn't even about politics in the way we usually think of it. This was about responsibility, about drawing a line, about using influence not just to innovate, but to illuminate. The moment he made that statement, the world paused. Some clapped. Some gasped. Some got angry, but that's what truth does. It doesn't sit well with everyone. It doesn't aim to please. It aims to awaken. And maybe that's what Elon was trying to do, to wake people up, to say, this isn't normal. This isn't healthy. This can't continue, because the longer we let power go unchecked, the more we drift from who we were meant to be. He could have stayed quiet. He could have protected his brand, avoided backlash, played it safe. But silence has a price too. And sometimes not saying anything becomes its own kind of betrayal. Elon took the risk. He knew what was coming, the attacks, the debates, the division, and still he chose to speak. Not because he hated anyone, but because he believed something had to change. And in a world where truth is often filtered through fear, that kind of courage is rare. But boldness without grounding is just noise. What made Elon's statement different was that it came from a place of purpose. He wasn't trying to cancel. He wasn't playing political games. He was drawing attention to something bigger than personalities. To him, it was about accountability. Because if a former president, someone entrusted with the highest responsibility, can act without consequence, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the world? What are we saying to young people? That power makes you untouchable? That influence excuses everything? That truth bends for those who shout the loudest? Elon's words didn't just challenge Trump. They challenged us to rethink how we define leadership, to reevaluate who we follow and why, to ask whether popularity has replaced principle in the people we elevate. That's what real boldness looks like. Not just challenging others, but being willing to risk your own comfort for what you believe in. And yes, the backlash came. As it always does, people called him arrogant, unpatriotic, out of line. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to scream to be real. It just needs to stand, quiet, still, unshaken. Elon stood, and that alone sent shockwaves. Because in a culture obsessed with neutrality, choosing to speak, especially against someone powerful, is an act of rebellion. But it's also an act of love. Love for country, love for justice, love for the idea that even the most powerful should be held accountable. This wasn't just Elon being bold. This was Elon being responsible. And maybe, just maybe, that's what influence is really for. Not just to create companies or disrupt industries, but to shape a better, more honest world. His statement may not change everyone's mind. It may not win every heart, but it reminded the world of something that can't be ignored. Silence can be comfortable, but speaking truth is transformational. And no matter how much power you hold, there is still something greater, the courage to stand alone when everyone else is sitting quietly. In the end, history doesn't remember who had the loudest voice. It remembers who had the courage to use it for something great. This moment isn't just about Musk or Trump. It's about us. What we tolerate, what we stand for, and who we choose to listen to when the noise fades and only the truth remains. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to take sides, but to ask the hard questions.